we are back for the second half of the show on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Before I dive into the Russell Wilson contract situation and before I throw out a lot of numbers out there for you guys with this contract, I want to remind you guys to please, if you have any questions, please use the tip and donations link down below running across that ticker. With any questions that you may have, use the link streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that link is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. I'm able to see your questions better to put towards the top of the list if you guys use that link. It helps out the show a lot, the entire network, and all of our shows as well. So greatly appreciated if you guys could use that link and with any question that you may have. But without further ado, moving on to this contract situation, and I had to find a lot of websites and just inform myself a lot better on this contract situation. As I'm sure most of you may know, the Broncos gave Russell Wilson a hefty contract back in 2022, a 5-year deal worth $242.5 million. It includes a $37 million payout in 2025 that is guaranteed if Wilson is unable to pass a physical coming up to start this new year. But yeah, I'm sure it's no secret to anybody that the Broncos, not only this past season, but this whole situation with Russell Wilson, Nathaniel Hackett, now even Sean Payton, has all really just blown up in their face, to say the least, because Russell Wilson struggled with Nathaniel Hackett. They got rid of him. Sean Payton actually said it was the worst coaching job he's ever seen. So then he took the reins, and it really didn't get that much better under Sean Payton. There were some moments where they had close games. They showed some improvement, but really overall, you've seen no growth. They benched Russell Wilson at one point during the season. He later came out saying that they benched him, or they threatened to bench him if he didn't renegotiate his contract or lower his potential injury guarantees in his contract. That would mean if he got injured, his money would still be guaranteed, but obviously he didn't renegotiate that, and they benched him towards the end of the season. And all that just kind of breaks into this situation where the Broncos are trying to get rid of him. It's no secret. And most people in the media think that he won't make it past this season, or he won't make it another season with the Broncos, just because of the whole negativity scenario surrounding him and the coaching staff, the organization. So I wrote down some scenarios that could happen with the Broncos, which one's most likely to happen, and teams that I think could still use him, because in my opinion, I don't think he's done. I don't think that no team's going to sign him. No one's going to take that contract. I'm not of that mindset. I think he still has something to give, at least for some teams that don't have the franchise guy on the roster, or they don't have a plan to draft one anytime soon. So one scenario that the Broncos could do is nothing. If they don't touch the contract, don't do anything at all, and still designate his release past June 1st, Denver would carry that $35.5 million cap hit into June, and then take on the $53 million of dead cap space in 2024 and $32 million in 2025. So you might be asking, why would they do this? Basically to get the bigger hit out of the way first, right? If they designate his release past June 1st, they carry his salary, right? That's given. Then they take on $53 million initially, and then 32 less, or $32 million in 2025, which obviously is less, and it gives them some leeway, a little bit to, to fix the cap space, maneuver around it a little bit, take the worst part out of the way this year, and then live with what you can scramble out of in the next year in 2025. If they don't exercise the $22 million option, it turns into guaranteed money. So that ties in with what is most likely. Um, if they do exercise that $22 million option that they had, um, they could make it a little bit less. Um, and just because of that, making it a little bit less, this would split the cap impact into 35 million in dead money in 2024, and then 49.5 million in dead money in 2025. Only if they exercise that $22 million option, right? So if they do that, they can kind of split it up into taking on that 35 million initially, and then comes the big hit later on in 2025. But that option gives them a bit more leeway as well in cap next season compared to this season. If they were to do the first option, not do anything to the contract, not renegotiate nothing, they would just still designate him for a release after June 1st, but it just determines, or it depends on, if they want to exercise that $22 million option as well. And just from what I've read, from what I've heard on TV and stuff like that, exercising that option seems to be the most likely, because if they don't do it, it just turns into guaranteed money, into that guaranteed salary that they owe Russell Wilson. So they obviously don't want to do that, and they're going to try to do that, I'm hearing, and, try to get out of this contract as quickly as they can. It's going to feel like a drag, really, because when you give that sort of contract, you're tied to it. You're bonded to it for that time being. Investing that sort of money in a guy like Russell Wilson, for him not to pan out like you planned it, is going to cost a lot to just bail out of it with 2 years remaining. So the Broncos are in a rough spot, just cap-wise, rebuilding-wise, because once he's gone, they're going to need to find a quarterback, and then how much money do they have to work with over these next 2 years to kind of salvage something. Of course, they have their draft picks, but it's going to be a long process, drawn-out process to finally get rid of this issue that the Broncos are facing. But once they do release him past June 1st, I had some teams that I think are the most likely to pick him up. Probably not trade for him, but just to pick him up and kind of take on that contract. And there is one team that stands out to me most of all, but I will start with the teams that I think aren't as likely to get him, that being the Patriots and Commanders. Just to start off, obviously, Sam Howell, Mac Jones, and Bailey Zappi were the quarterbacks involved with both of these teams. And it's no secret that the fans, anybody that watched their games, would say that either of these teams need a quarterback. That position needs to be upgraded. And with the Patriots getting rid of Bill Belichick, bringing in Gerard Mayo as their new head coach, a younger sort of new era starting for the Patriots. And on the other side with the Commanders, they still have Sam Howell, which I really didn't think played awful. They need to get him out the door right away. I thought there were some moments, some games where he played up to the competition, most notably just off the top of my head against the Eagles. He kept them in that game in Philly, and to some extent in Washington as well. But it's just being rumored that they're most likely going to draft someone with the second pick in the NFL draft. A lot of mock drafts have Jalen Daniels, Drake May going there. So those two teams, in my opinion, wouldn't be the most likely candidates for Russell Wilson, just because they have that draft scenario, that draft positioning where they could find their guys in the top 3 picks. The Patriots have the 3rd pick, and obviously Caleb Williams seems like the consensus number 1. But then after that, it seems like Drake May could be the 2, and then Jaden Daniels being drafted to the Pats if they were to go that route and get him. But if you want to play devil's advocate and say, why not trade back a few spots, fill out any voids that you think you need other than the quarterbacks, get more draft capital, and take on Russell Wilson at least for a year. That could also work, but I just don't see these teams making that sort of move. I think teams drafting in such high spots where they have a chance to get a quarterback aren't going to take the risk of moving out of it because of that hindsight backlash that they could face from everyone saying how this was the biggest mistake of the generation of the decade, drafting or moving out of this position and missing out on a potential generational type of quarterback. I think everyone's scared to make that move. So I don't see the Patriots or Commanders really trading out of that and kind of taking that risk, that long-term risk. But another team that I thought was a good spot for Russell Wilson could be the Minnesota Vikings. They're in a similar position. Actually, no, not similar to the Pats and Commanders, similar to the next team I'm going to mention. But they're picking 11. Not many mock drafts, or in my opinion, I don't see one of the top quarterbacks making it there. You could argue J.J. McCarthy could be around that range, and if they want to take a risk on him, they could. But I just think they need other areas that they could fill to make this team a little bit better. And in the same breath, they could re-sign Kirk Cousins. It's not totally off the table that they want to move on from him. And just doing that with that scenario, if they keep Kirk Cousins, I think it'll probably benefit them a little bit more because Justin Jefferson is owed a contract extension. It's almost time to pay him. And I just believe that if I'm the front office of the Vikings and I'm trying to sell Justin Jefferson to stay here, re-sign with the Vikings, I'm saying I think it's more appealing to Justin Jefferson to ride out another year with a quarterback that he's already played with. He knows he's going to get him the ball. He knows he wants to get Jefferson the ball, get him into open space, look for matchups and exploit those matchups. I think that's easier to sell to Jefferson than bringing in Russell Wilson with a almost tarnished recent couple years in Denver. Trying to sell that to him, I don't think is very appealing at all if you want him to stay and learn a new quarterback, the way he throws, the timing, get all that, start that process all over again. I think it's more likely that they either draft one or just re-sign Kirk Cousins for another year, coming off that Achilles rupture, and then they could work out a deal with Jefferson and then look to find their long-term quarterback. But the next team that I thought was most likely the best fit, in my opinion, for Russell Wilson would be within the division with the Las Vegas Raiders. They're in a little bit worse of a situation than the Vikings just because they're picking 13, right? So that really was the selling point for me to get a guy like Russell Wilson because their only quarterback now is Aiden O'Connell after the suspension of Jimmy G for the performance-enhancing drugs. They are most likely to cut him. And I was actually informed of this that because of the medicine that he took, that guaranteed money that was left on his contract is actually not guaranteed anymore. So it makes it easier for them to cut him, get rid of him. And that only leaves you with Aiden O'Connell and new head coach Antonio Pierce. I couldn't remember his name. Antonio Pierce now, in a recent interview with The Pivot, said that he has confidence in O'Connell. He showed some signs there towards the end of the year that put him in good spots to not lose games. You know, he played pretty well in some of those games. But is he the long-term option? I think a lot of people would say no. And picking at 13, again, in my opinion, I don't see a franchise guy being there at that pick because Daniels, May, and Caleb Williams could be gone. And even J.J. McCarthy, who has risen up the draft boards, could be gone with the Vikings at 11. So I don't think they have the capital to make a trade. And I think it's going to be tough for them to make something happen with any team picking earlier than that. So bringing in Russell Wilson to at least compete with Aiden O'Connell for that spot and then moving on seems like the most likely outcome for me for the Raiders. But like always, let me know what you guys think. Is there any team that you think has a good chance of him that I didn't include? But to me, it seems like the Las Vegas Raiders would benefit the most from transitioning with Wilson and O'Connell into a new era with Antonio Pierce, and not rushing into something just to get some early success sooner rather than later. But with that, I'm going to end this segment there, and we're going to go to our final break. And on the other side of the break, I want to talk about the teams that I believe in the NFC that will challenge the 49ers more next season and possibly surpass them next season. So don't go anywhere. That's coming up right after this break.